My grandfather raised his wine glass at my 28th birthday dinner and spoke a sentence that sliced the room clean in half. Claire, why don't you tell us how you've managed your $3 million trust fund over the last 25 years? The laughter around the table died instantly. Forks froze midair. Even the candle flames looked like they were holding their breath. My pulse echoed in my ears as I whispered, I never received any trust fund. Grandpa's expression dimmed. His attorney stepped forward and placed a thick pile of documents on the table with a heavy thud. And in that moment, before a single word was spoken, I realized someone sitting at that table should have been calm. But instead, they were terrified. My name is Claire Monroe. For most of my life, I believed staying quiet would make everything smoother. Quiet daughters don't stir conflict. Quiet daughters don't disrupt the perfect image. In my family, perfection meant pretending every crack in the foundation didn't exist. I lived in a tiny apartment in Seattle with my roommate, Jade. She worked at a cafe down the street and always smelled faintly like steamed milk and cinnamon. She was the only person who ever saw the late nights I spent hunched over my laptop, juggling UX gigs that came and went without warning, trying to keep rent paid and lights on. She teased me about surviving solely on caffeine and stubbornness, but she also understood the truth. I didn't have a safety net. I never had one. Meanwhile, my parents, Elaine and Daniel, lived in a pristine Bellevue home with a perfect lawn and a collection of seasonal decorations rotated like clockwork. Inside lived a mother obsessed with image, a father who swallowed every opinion to avoid arguments, and my younger sister Lily, who floated through life with every soft landing provided to her effortlessly. Lily got the private school, the apartment fully funded so she could focus on her passions, and I got long lectures about building character and becoming self-reliant. When I needed someone to co-sign my first lease because I had zero credit history, my mother sighed and said, "We can't bail you out every time, Claire," as if there had ever been a single moment they had. Still, I kept showing up. Birthdays, holidays, dinners. A part of me still clung to the sweet moments with Grandpa Arthur. His steady voice, his warm hands. When I was 6, he walked beside me along the shoreline near their house and said, "One day, no matter what happens, I'll make sure you're safe." I never realized that memory was a warning and a promise. My 28th birthday was supposed to be simple but polished. According to my mother, the restaurant had prepared a private room glowing with amber lighting, white cloths, perfectly arranged glasses. The kind of setup she lived for. It felt like every staged family photo we'd ever taken, beautiful, stiff, and hollow. I arrived after work, still in my trench coat, hair windblown from the Seattle breeze. My mother's eyes flicked over me, and instead of fixing my collar, she adjusted Lily's hair. Lily grinned like always, blissfully unaware of the quiet currents that ran through our family. Dinner began with the same subtle digs as always. Elaine complimented my resourcefulness in that sugar-coated tone she used to signal that my life was a consequence of poor decisions, not circumstances. "Claire's always been so independent," she told the table beside us. "She never needed much from us." She made it sound like a flattering observation, but it hit with the sting of a slap. Across from me, Lily twisted her delicate gold bracelet, a gift I never got an equivalent of. She launched into tales of her weekend getaway, while my father announced proudly, "She earned it after working so hard." Hard work? Lily had been on a break from school for half a year. Meanwhile, I could still taste the resentment of nights spent stranded on highways with a broken car engine, calling tow trucks I couldn't afford because my mother had said, "You're an adult, figure it out." I remembered semesters in college when I couldn't buy textbooks, pleading for even a small loan. "We can't keep rescuing you, Claire. It's not fair to Lily." Those memories rose up now, stitching themselves into a pattern I should have seen long ago. While the others chatted, Grandpa kept his gaze on me. He always seemed to know when I was hurt, even when I tried to mask it. When the server finished refilling our glasses and the room settled into a soft hush, Grandpa raised his wine. And then, everything came undone. "Claire, Tell everyone how you've managed your $3 million trust fund. The response was immediate. Laughter burst around the table, shocked, amused, confused. Lily giggled, assuming it was a joke. My mother's face flickered with panic before she snapped on a brittle smile. My father lowered his glass so fast it clattered. A freezing, hollow cold swept over me, not a shiver, something deeper, something that emptied out your entire chest. What trust fund? I asked. Grandpa's smile dropped. The one I created for you when you were 3 years old. My tongue felt thick. I never received anything. A suffocating silence slammed into the room. Lily's grin faded. Dad stared down at the table. My mother looked at me like I'd spoken nonsense. The truth wasn't missing. Someone had buried it. The evening didn't end. It shattered. Chairs scraped. Voices tumbled over each other. The room suddenly felt too tight, too loud, too exposed. My mother regained her composure first, pasting on a smile so forced it looked like it hurt. "Dad," she said sweetly to Grandpa, "Claire must be confused. She's always been scattered. You know how she gets." As if I'd imagined 28 years of scraping by alone. My father cleared his throat, staring down at his untouched plate. Lily blinked rapidly, looking like someone who'd just discovered her childhood bedroom was built on a trapdoor. But Grandpa didn't look at any of them. He looked only at me. "Claire, be in my office tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. It wasn't a suggestion, and that terrified everyone at that table. I got up and left before anyone could follow. The cold Bellevue night air slammed into me, but I didn't slow down. I walked past glowing windows, past laughing families, past couples celebrating birthdays that didn't end in devastation. I didn't cry. I just kept replaying the same soft, cracked sentence. I never got one. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking. My phone buzzed. "Jade." "How was dinner?" she asked. I opened my mouth, but the silence that came out told her everything. "Come home," she whispered. "Whatever happened, we'll figure it out." But deep down, I knew this wasn't something that could be fixed. This was something that had been designed, covered, hidden with intention. The next morning, I took the early bus into downtown Seattle. Fog slid through the streets as the city slowly stretched awake. Grandpa's office sat high up in a glass tower, warm and quiet, smelling faintly like cedar and old paper. He was waiting for me, a folder resting on his knee. Disappointment settled into the lines of his face. "I set aside a trust fund for you when you were 3, he said. $3 million. It was meant to give you choices, security, freedom. You should have received full access at 18. 18? The birthday I spent wearing a grocery store apron, scanning groceries for customers who didn't bother looking up. Why didn't I know about it?" My voice cracked. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" He placed the folder in my hands. Inside was an early audit, pages and pages of withdrawals, transfers, payments for expenses that weren't mine. Repeated names, repeated signatures. Every dollar had been touched by only 2 people. Elaine Monroe, Daniel Monroe. My parents hadn't just hidden my trust fund. They had drained it. For 25 years. Mortgage payments, home upgrades, Lily's tuition, Lily's apartment, vacations, car expenses, luxury purchases, everything that had always been too expensive for me. I felt a burn rise behind my ribs. Anger, grief, humiliation, realization twisting together in one violent knot. Every time I had worked 2 jobs, every time I'd begged for help, every time I'd swallowed the feeling of being forgotten, it hadn't been fate, it had been theft. Grandpa leaned forward. "Claire," he said, "I hired a legal team. My lawyer, Collins, will run a full audit, but I need you to decide how far this goes." I stared at the pages, at the small, neat signatures of the 2 people who were supposed to protect me. "I want everything," I said, Every record, every receipt, every dollar. I want the truth." Grandpa nodded once, slow and firm. "Then we'll ask them to come in for a meeting." "I want to be there," I said. "You will," he promised. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet daughter or the forgotten one. I was the one walking toward the fire. And this time, I wasn't the one who'd get burned. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon, the kind of cold Seattle day where the sky looked like brushed steel and the air felt heavy enough to press into your lungs. Grandpa insisted it take place in a private conference room inside his building. Neutral territory, he said. But the truth was he wanted every second of what was about to happen to be documented, witnessed, and impossible for anyone to escape. I arrived early. My palms were sweating despite the chill, but my steps were steady. Jade had hugged me before I left the apartment, telling me I looked like someone stepping into a courtroom and a rebirth at the same time. I wasn't sure what that meant until I saw my reflection in the elevator glass. My posture was straight, my face was calm, and my eyes held something I'd never seen in myself before: resolve. When the elevator doors opened, Colin stood waiting. Grandpa's lawyer looked exactly as he had the first time I met him. Tidy gray hair, tailored suit, and a stack of documents cradled under one arm like a quiet threat. He nodded as if he had already evaluated my emotional state and deemed it stable enough for what was ahead. "They're on their way," he said. I didn't ask who they meant. We both knew. Inside the conference room, Grandpa sat at the head of a long wooden table. His face was unreadable, but the tension in his jaw told me he'd barely slept. When he saw me, his expression softened just a fraction, but it was enough. He reached for my hand, squeezed it once, then released. "You're not alone today." The door swung open. My parents entered first. Elaine walked quickly, shoulders stiff, face arranged in that familiar mask she used whenever she needed to appear blameless. Daniel followed, quiet, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. Lily came behind them, clutching her purse, her expression a confusing blend of worry and disbelief. She had been told there was a family issue that needed clarifying. No one had told her she was part of the issue. "Dad," Elaine began sharply, "I don't know what this is about, but dragging us into some formal—" Grandpa held up a hand. "Sick." It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. They sat. Collins closed the door behind them, walked to the center of the room, and placed a thick stack of statements on the table. The sound, a deep, unforgiving thud, seemed to echo off the walls. Lily flinched. My father swallowed hard. Elaine's eyes widened. "These are your signatures," Collins finished. "Over 25 years' worth of withdrawals, transfers, and payments drawn from the trust fund intended solely for Claire Monroe." The room went silent. Then Collins began reading. Year 1, mortgage payments. Year 2, home repairs, kitchen remodel. He flipped a page. Tuition payments. Not for Claire. Car expenses, travel expenses, credit card balances, apartment rent for Lily Monroe. With every word, something inside me unfurled. It wasn't joy. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was clarity. The kind of clarity you only get when you finally see a picture in full light instead of the shadows you'd been shown. My mother's face drained of color. "This is being taken out of context." Collins didn't blink. "The context is financial abuse of a beneficiary. The audit is complete." I stared at her, at the woman who had spent my entire childhood telling me I was too sensitive. She wasn't speaking to me. She was fighting for her image. My father finally spoke, voice thin. We used the money for the family. It wasn't personal." My laugh came out before I could stop it. "Not personal?" My hands trembled, but my voice stayed low, controlled. "When my car broke down and I begged you for help, that wasn't personal. When I nearly dropped out because I couldn't afford textbooks, was that your idea of family?" He flinched like I slapped him. Elaine drew in a breath, chin lifting. "Claire, we always intended to put the money back when I turned 40.
50, or never. Grandpa leaned forward, his gaze sharp. You stole from a child. Her throat bobbed. Dad, we had bills. We all have bills, he said, but not everyone steals from their own daughter to pay them. Lily finally spoke. Mom, Dad, you used her money for my apartment, for my school. Her voice cracked. Sweetheart, Elaine said shakingly, we wanted you to have every opportunity. And I didn't, I whispered. Elaine turned to me, eyes brimming with a panic that wasn't remorse. Claire, you've always been so independent. You never asked for much. I leaned in. I didn't ask because you told me I couldn't, because every time I came to you, you made me feel like needing anything was a burden. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of all the things they couldn't deny anymore. Grandpa tapped the table once, firmly. I am revoking your financial authority effective immediately. Elaine jolted. You can't do that. I can, he said coldly, and I have. Daniel sagged into his chair like the weight of 25 years had finally landed on him. Lily stared at the table, hands covering her mouth. Colin slid another set of documents toward me. This, he said, transfers full control of the remaining trust assets to you. Your parents' access is terminated permanently. Elaine's breath hitched. Daniel closed his eyes. Lily whispered, Oh my God. My hand hovered over the pen. For a moment, I wasn't signing a document. I was signing a truth.
I pressed my name onto the page. Elaine's chair scraped violently as she stood. Claire, please, this will ruin us. I looked up at her, finally seeing her clearly. Then maybe you shouldn't have built your life on money that wasn't yours. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her legs shook. Daniel reached out to steady her, but his hand trembled too. They nearly collapsed. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet daughter holding the family together. I was the one tearing down the lie they built. Though when the meeting ended, the room felt hollow, like every lie had been scraped off the walls and left nowhere to hide. My parents walked out first, my mother trembling, my father guiding her with a hand that barely held steady. Lily lingered, staring at me with a mixture of guilt and something that almost looked like apology. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then finally whispered, I didn't know, Claire. I nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't anger either. It was a beginning. Over the next few weeks, everything shifted. Collins finalized the legal transfers. The remaining trust assets were secured in my name. My parents were notified of potential civil consequences if they attempted to interfere or conceal additional misuse. For the first time in their lives, they faced the weight of their choices without a shield. Grandpa visited me in my new condo, a modest place in Seattle, but mine in a way no space had ever been. He walked slowly through the rooms, touching the walls, smiling in small, quiet approval. You deserve this, he said. You deserved it all along. I didn't tell him I cried the first night I slept there. Half grief, half relief. Grief for the family I never really had. Relief for the life I finally could build. I spent more time at the park by the water, letting the winter air clear what was left of the ache. I wasn't healed, not yet, but I wasn't drowning anymore. For the first time, the silence around me didn't feel like something stolen. It felt like something I owned. In the weeks that followed, I kept thinking about something Grandpa once told me when I was little. How safety wasn't just about being protected, but about knowing who stood beside you when truth finally surfaced. I understand it now. Family isn't defined by blood or last names. It's defined by honesty, by accountability, by the people who don't vanish when the truth is inconvenient. I don't hate my parents. I don't think I ever will. But I've learned that distance can be an act of love. Love for myself? For the life I'm finally allowed to build? For the peace I refuse to surrender again. If you've ever had to step away from people who should have cared for you, I want you to know you're not alone. Your story matters. Your boundaries matter. Share your experience in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, follow the channel so you won't miss the next